Let's try that one again. Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, man. So sometimes the stream just stops working and says, hey, you had internet issues despite having hardwired gigabit Ethernet connection.
Well, you know what they say whenever there's unexplainable technological difficulties.
I don't. Why don't you tell me?
It's Mercury Retrograde right now. And Mercury is the planet that rules communication and technology. So if you've been experiencing some random, seemingly unexplainable technological glitches that just don't normally happen but suddenly are occurring more often, blame it on Mercury.
Blame it on Mercury. When in doubt, blame it on Mercury. But because of that, we shall double time this. We were talking about our recap from our episode on Friday. Episode 81, we were talking about coaching, and we talked a little bit about coaching and talked a little bit about how people transition from maybe they get coaching in sports in their youth, and then they transition into the more just kind of recreational sports where they play for fun or things like that, and oftentimes they lose getting the coaching aspect. And then the question then becomes, well, where else is a person being coached in their life? And if they're lucky, maybe through their work, they've got a good manager or some sort of some people who are doing something to help them develop as a person, plan their career, things like that. But, you know, I would say that is by and far the small minority of people who are getting that type of thing from work, especially because, you know, I work for a great company, and I know many people who work for great companies, and they get some things, and you get some things from there. But even those which are touted as some of the best places to get those types of things, there's a lot of stuff that's left missing. And so I kind of was issuing the question or challenge like, hey, what if people were to invest in themselves and to work on having themselves and their lives coached to be a better them? Like, what could we accomplish, right? Mm-hmm. What all could we do as a people, as a world, as a civilization? If it's like, instead of us just going through life, instead of us just doing things and letting things happen at us, like, we do it in a more intelligent way, and we think about it, and we talk with people who have been there before. We learn from their mistakes instead of just making the same exact ones that they have. And we leverage the future. We stand on the shoulders of giants, to use that phrase, right? Where you take advantage of all the things that people have done and learned in the past, and then go from there. So anyways, I guess Friday we talked a little bit about that, and how, of course, we ended with Helpful for Life is one of the ways that people can do that. But our challenge for that day, I believe, was related to getting some sort of mentorship, or getting some sort of coaching involved in your life. And to be frank, I'm a little all over the place right now because we had all these technical issues, so I'm not 100% sure on that challenge. I apologize.
Well, I remembered what you were asking me whenever it cut off was because I think you were saying how you didn't really know of many people who had gotten life coaches in real life. And
right.
I'm probably a little bit more familiar with it because there are life coaches that run their businesses out of the Millhouse, McKinney, the women's co-working space that I'm a member of. So there's like a life coach who specializes in helping divorced women find love again. And then there are more like healthy lifestyle coaches, where maybe they have some background in nutrition or physical therapy. Ayurveda is a health life practice. So there's all sorts of life coaches that I've been introduced to at the Millhouse. But yeah, and then I was thinking about how in hobbies you can have like an instructor if you take classes or whatever. So now that I'm taking horseback riding lessons again, my instructor is kind of like my horsey coach. So.
Your horsey coach. Yeah, one of the things we also mentioned that helped jog a little bit of memory for me on Friday was Donald Miller. And he's famous for, among other things, but the thing he's most famous for is something called the Story Brand. And he's releasing a new book, or he has released a new book. And as part of that, he's doing a series on his podcast where he's kind of talking through some of the main points. And it was something along the lines of becoming the hero of your story, or something like that.
Something like be your own hero, maybe, but basically there's a podcast that we're going to listen to again today.
Yes, and that was one of the. I'll grab the link here so we can have the exact name and share it in chat. But the point of it was talking about, hey, it's very easy to get off track with where you're wanting to go. And so we brought up Alexandra, and she's like, because she's always saying like, hey, you need to know where you're going, you need to know what your destination is before you can do all the analytics, you can figure out all the steps and do the best thing to get you where you wanted to go. Well, Donald Miller was saying, he's like, hey, you I think it's Hero on a Mission, maybe. Yeah. And it was he in the podcast, he was talking about how, one, he did more and achieved more from the ages 40 to 50 than he did in the 40 years before that. So we briefly talked about, how or why that could be possible and what we thought about that on Friday. But he said one of the things that he does now is he's created his plan, his long-term plan, his short, midterm plan, and he looks at that every morning, at least every weekday morning, because he says you would be surprised how, you come and sit down, say Monday morning, and it's so easy for you to get focused on the wrong thing or to be working on something like, hey, maybe that's good, maybe that's useful, but that's not the most important thing you should be doing right now. And you know why? Because you thought about that before. You've separated the do and the think, and you've recognized like, hey, before I said, yeah, it'd be good for me to tweak that website, make it a little nicer. Oh, it'd be good for me to spend a really long time on that email that I've been working on. But maybe that's not the best use of my time. So we talked a little bit about that, and that link will magically appear after the fact because my search is not working for me today either. So,
Well, that ties us back in perfectly to today, because what Donald Miller's talking about is basically intentional life design by goal setting and building your morning routine around the larger goals that you have for your life, so that every day you're starting yourself off on the right foot and making a tangible step of progress towards those bigger goals. And that's how I use the moon cycle in my journaling practice.
Yeah. So with that, let's run our intro, then we'll give a very brief intro to the day, and then we'll go jump into a nice quick version. Helpful for life. Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to What the Hell is Life. This is episode...
What the hell is life?
What the hell is life?
That's our morning.
That's a good one. I like it. Monday, January...
Existential slip.
31st. Yeah, instead of a Freudian slip. I like it. Monday, January 31st. This is episode 82. And today we're joined by the lovely Danielle Garcia. I'm Reed Garcia, the founder and CEO of Helpful for Life. Words. Cheers to that.
Cheers. That's why you have some.
Yeah. We'll be right back. Oh gosh. Wait
What the
for
hell
it.
is life?
You don't have an AirPod in, but
Oh.
turning around. All right. Welcome to What the Hell is Water, episode 82. We're going to have a quick unplanned aside here just to let people in on a little story. So, in case you didn't happen to be watching live, what just happened was we started off our stream. It got cut off because of an internet connection, despite us having the best internet connection and it being hardwired. Then we restarted a stream, which, oh, by the way, every time we restart a stream, we have to remake the whole thing, and everyone who was on the old stream has to click over to this new one because of the software that we use. So that's fun. So we did that, and we were restarting the stream. We were just trying to give the recap, having an issue with the other software that we were using that has access to all the information of the things we've talked about. Then we were like, all right, whatever. We're just going to keep moving. We're going to keep rolling. We'll see where this thing goes. And then we're like, oh, man, cheers to all this stuff messing up. Let's just have a cheers and move forward and move on and stay positive. And then we spill tea all over the expensive electronic devices that are in my lap. So there we go. And
so
then
that is our Monday.
That's our
so
Monday. Yep. Sometimes that's how Mondays go. And then I switched over. I was like, oh, I'll switch over real quick so I can, put it on and be right back so people can have music. They're not sitting there in silence. And then a couple minutes later, I see a thing that says, oh, you're not muted. So that's great because we don't have the soundboard setup that I bought for 2 months ago. Because we need more help and more time, which brings us to an exciting announcement. Helpful for Life has actually hired its first employee. For those who are not aware, I'm the only one who's been working on this thing full time. Danielle has been an amazing help on the side, part-time. Sometimes, for example, when filming Kickstart Your Kitchen, she came in, she did a whole bunch of work, and definitely could not have done that without her. But other times, she was fully focused on her own stuff and her own writing. And so it's the start of a new chapter for Helpful for Life. So we're really excited for this and where it can take us next, because the thing is people keep saying like, oh, well, you should change this or improve that or change that. And it's like, yeah, I know we have the big list. But that's some of the realities of just being largely a one-man show is you don't have it all figured out, or you don't, even if you do have it all figured out, you don't have enough manpower to get all the things lined up. And so, for example, we have a timer to help us stay on time that we've been working on getting started, and we need a better drink system here, clearly, now that we've had 2 spills on the show. But the bottom line of all this is that you just keep moving, you keep going on, and then you make the best of with what you got. So, for the third and final time, hopefully, knock on wood, let's talk about what we're going to talk about now that the episode's supposed to end in 10 minutes. So today we were talking about the moon. And, I started to write about the things of the moon, and I was like, okay, well, it's kind of interesting because between you and me, like we're both connected to the moon and the stars and outer space and the larger universe in different ways, which I kind of thought was interesting. And I don't think I'd really connected until today when we were sitting down to have this discussion. I was like, okay, well, I'm a guy who's worked on missiles, which are a fancy way of saying rockets, except they're meant to hit something. And I worked on satellites, which are the things that are launched on the top of rockets. People like to say, "Oh, you're so smart. Are you a rocket scientist?" Well, no. I mean, but the rocket scientists, they do the part that only has to last for a few minutes. The satellite, that has to last for years, sometimes decades, and it's got to ride on top of the rocket. So you tell me, rocket engineer, satellite engineer, I don't know. I'll leave that up for you engineers to debate. But anyways, so I'm connected to the outer space in that way, right? Because right now, I mean, there are satellites that are orbiting Earth that I worked on, which I think is pretty cool. And I think I've mentioned it before. If you're ever flying, I think for sure in America, I don't know if it's elsewhere too, but if you're flying on an American Airlines flight and you're getting internet over the continental U.S., there's a good chance that internet is going through one of my satellites, which is pretty cool.
And if you have shitty Wi-Fi, then
it's definitely
you have someone
not
to blame.
No, it's using the old system. So it's not using. Yeah, picture me every time you want to be pissed off about your internet and your plane, and then you recognize like, oh, that's right. I am hurtling through the air at 500 miles per hour in a metal tube with. I can order what I want to eat. I can order what I want to drink, and I can do all of that for less than a couple $100s. While I pull out my magical device out of my pocket where I can see into anything, a moving picture from anywhere in the world, and I can do all of that while I'm flying through the air at 500 miles per hour. Yeah, after you do all of that and you still want to complain, then you can think of me. But first, think of all the magical things that are happening to get you to do the things that you're doing right now that you're complaining about. But anyways, back to our connection to the stars. So I'm connected through this kind of this work area and thinking about rocket launches and the galaxies and the universe and the planets and the solar systems, all that kind of stuff from a scientific point of view. And, things in media, whether it be books and movies, TV shows, also museums, I find space interesting. And then for you, your challenge or your interest is a little bit different, and it's largely around astrology and the cycles. So let's talk a little bit about that first. Like, what is it that draws you to the moon, Danielle?
Well, I guess. I feel like I had somewhere I wanted to go with that, and
well, let me ask you this.
I
What was
lost
the
it.
first time you started to pay attention to the moon a little more?
Well, that was I think it was at the end of 2019. I'd gotten into tarot reading, and then some of the first tarot spreads that I started learning how to do were tarot spreads for the moon cycle of the day. So, like on a new moon day, you would do a tarot spread that helped you with intention setting for the month. And that was right around the time I was getting back into bullet journaling and habit tracking and doing some like monthly planning and goal setting in my journal. And I came across this concept on some witchy blogs that you can goal set with the moon cycle, because basically it's a once a month reminder, physical, like visual reminder that time is passing. And when you can't see the moon in the sky, that's like when you're going into your dark cave hibernation mode, turning inward, thinking about what goals you want to set. And then as the moon starts getting bigger and more and more of the moon is illuminated as we work towards the full moon, that's like the starting to take action on your goals and doing your daily habits and building some sort of progress to celebrate when the moon is full. And then you're having gratitude for the changes and maybe the positive changes that have happened since you started making intentional progress towards those goals. Or maybe the full moon is a time of illuminating the shadow self that has started to come about in the last couple of weeks as you started to try and make progress on these goals. Maybe you discovered some struggle or block that you have around that. And so that's kind of the full moon's the time to like reevaluate the goals that you set at the new moon, and then start releasing any other bad habits as the moon starts to go from full back to a dark moon. You're shedding the parts of you that you've realized aren't helpful anymore as you are working towards the goals that you set. So basically, it's at every phase of the moon, it's a way to evaluate where you are on a monthly basis and make intentional decisions for your life.
Yeah, and that brings up a lot of things. So I'll just kind of rapid fire a couple of them. So one, you use the word intentional, which makes me think of our discussions with Eric Wooten. He's one of our relationship experts, and he has 3 pillars that he recommends for good relationships, and that's community, personal responsibility, and intentionality. So it's one of his pillars, like, hey, in being intentional about your relationship can help you be a better you, have a better couple, things like that. And oh, by the way, personal responsibility is right in there too. So if you're being intentional and you're being personally responsible, trying to make yourself better as an individual, you're going to become as a better you to whatever relationship you're in. So that's one thing that popped in my head. It also popped in my head, you said, oh, you're letting part of you die, because it's like, oh, that's the part of me I don't want anymore. And that helped bring up our episode with Justin Corno we had last week, where he talked about that. And I believe he was saying something about, maybe it's Buddha quote, I'm not sure if that's true or not, but he said something about it. He realized that he needed part of himself to die, right? And as he had gotten into some depressing thoughts, that was one of his things that kind of helped him realize, like, hey, no, it's not the whole me that I am not a fan of. Like, it's just this one part that I want to move forward from. And then the next thing is the idea that the really cool thing about the moon and the sun and the stars is that you can see them from wherever you are in the world, which, I'm not going to say that's 100% true in absolute every place,
for half
right?
the day.
But because, there's, things like pollution and, based on if you're really far north or really far south, like there may be some weird geometry things going on there. But the point is you can be anywhere in the world for the most part, and you can see the same thing from wherever you are. And everywhere the sun rises and sets once a day, and that there's something about that that's kind of like unifying in a way. It's like, hey, at the end of the day, we're all humans. We're all on the same ball of rock. We're all orbiting these same stars out there and these other planets, and the moon, which is just a giant piece of rock that's going around us. Like, that's all going around us. And oh, by the way, it's interesting because we live in a universe that's expanding, and it's always going towards chaos, but yet there are rules that we abide by and that the world abides by. And guess what? You as an individual human, like, you're not making an impact on those big universal laws. Like, you're not going to change gravity. You're not going to change the passage of time. Like, sure, maybe you find some ways to like cheat it or get around it for like a little bit or whatnot, but you're not going to make any impact on that. No, regardless of how you're floundering or whatnot, the world and the universe will just keep ticking on according to that order. So I don't know. I think it's something that is kind of cool and is good to reflect on every now and then. And it's like, it's so easy to get caught up in us and me and I. It's easy to forget like how small we are. We're a speck on a speck on a speck. There's the analogy of if the history of the universe was a book, you would have the book, and then it would be this big chapter book with all these pages, and then on the very last page, and like the very last sentence, like all of humanity would be like the period in the last sentence or something like that. Mm-hmm. I forget the exact analogy, but it's something like
a ridiculously long book.
A ridiculously long book, and like we're just a tiny dot, like as a human race, as a human species. And then within that dot, you would then have to find yourself, right? Mm-hmm. Which isn't to tell you that like you don't matter, you don't have an impact. Like clearly you have an impact on the people around you, you have an impact on yourself. But it's good to remind yourself like, hey, just how big everything is out there.
And I think that looking at it from that perspective, flipping it kind of also helps me feel like we each get to decide the impact that we can have within however wide of a circle we want that to be. Like, if there's all of this universe out there that everything is so big and we're so small, then like, I think that's kind of freeing. It's like, oh, well then I can, like, ultimately, if what I do is not going to have some catastrophic effect on the whole, course of time in the universe, then, I get to look at it like, what is the impact that I want to have in my circle? So
yeah, and like from a, especially if you're coming at it from like a negative perspective, like, oh, if you're the type of person who's always thinking like, how can I mess this up? Like, it can be a little freeing in that way. It's like, you're not going to mess it up. So just chill out, like live your life, enjoy it. And, it's funny, the other day I was thinking about, helpful for life. And we also do live video and stuff. And we're like, helpful for live. And then I was like, well, live is like live. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of a big message that I also want to help share is, how many people are going through life but not really living it, right? And how many people are just not actually focusing on being present in the moment, like having some direction in where they're going and not just being followed or not just, floating along in the stream, right? They're hoping to control the current and recognizing if they're in the EAC, bro, they know when they get off at their right spot, and maybe they want to get into another stream. So,
and that's what the moon has helped for me, because I mean, I was thinking when you were saying, like one way to mess it up is to not take any action and not do anything, or continually have month after month where you say you're going to do this journal challenge, but then let yourself get distracted with all these other projects. And, so I think it just ties in very well with what's been going on for us. And, I feel like with using the moon cycle for goal setting, then at least that's once every 30 days. I'm reviewing, saying like, okay, like looking back, here's what I said I wanted to do at the beginning of that month. And then here's where I got derailed. And here's the progress that I actually did make, like the steps that I did take before switching focus to something else that month. But just by that process of going back and saying like, I wrote that and I said I wanted to do that. And then every 29 days evaluating, okay, what are the goals and habits that I want to focus on for this month?
Yeah. And there's a couple of really cool things too that I also like about using the moon, as essentially a time tracker. I might have to link it later, but there's a video by Technology Connections on the use of analog clocks versus digital clocks. And for those who aren't aware, or you're less than 20 years old, an analog clock is a clock that has the hands, and it has a minute hand and an hour hand, and it's in a circle, and it looks the same regardless of where you are in the world. It goes in a circle 12 hours twice a day. And then there are also 24-hour variants of that, but less common. Then there's the digital clock, which literally shows digits, and you could look at it and it would say, 9:15 or whatever. However, in this video, they were talking about how he was like, I didn't realize it. And he's basically a Midwestern version of me. So I totally dig him. I'm not biased at all. He was talking about how he realized the other day, he's like, it's harder for me to process a digital clock. And he's a smart dude. He can do the simple math and things like that. But if you look at a number and you see 8:45, like, okay, I've got 15 minutes left. I know because I did 60 minus 45 is 15. And I know, okay, all right, I got 15 minutes left. But with an analog clock, you look and you see the visualization. You see, how much of that time is left? And you see it's kind of like a pie chart that just keeps filling up. And there are even some timers that actually have that visual thing where it's like red to show you how much time is left and as it goes away. And that can be a more effective timer because immediately as you glance at it, it's like a progress bar. And you can see how much time is left. So I really like that aspect with the moon. It's like your progress bar that follows you everywhere you go. Like literally you could travel, you could go wherever. You don't need to worry about time changes, any of that. Like, hey, you want to remember where you are, just look up. And you can see the moon a lot of times during the day too, in case people weren't aware of that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I like the idea of that it's with you wherever you go. And I also like the idea of connecting people across the world. Like, hey, It's kind of like you have a bat symbol. It's like, well, here's our moon symbol.
Mm-hmm.
you flash it up, and wherever you are in the world, if you're doing this, we're all looking at that together. We're all going through that together. So I think there's something really unifying about that as well.
Mm-hmm. Or if you don't see the moon and there's not that like external thing to look at, then that's your reminder to turn and look inward to decide your goals and focus for when the moon, you can see it again. Because like when you can't see it, you're like, oh, directionless. Where's my flashlight in the sky? Where's the bat symbol?
Mm-hmm.
So then that's a good reminder. It's the new moon to set your goals.
Nice. And so I just found that link, so I'll share that in the chat. But now let's move on to let's briefly talk about. I want to talk about what a moonshot is, and then we're going to talk about what you and I are doing that's related to that, and then we'll wrap up for the day. So first off, there's a term called a moonshot. Have you ever heard that phrase before?
I don't think so.
So a moonshot is basically a way of saying like, hey, this is something that is so far-fetched, it's like launching and going to the moon.
So shoot for the moon and then you'll land among the stars.
That's a phrase that's kind of related. Yeah, I was going to bring that one up too. And since we're here and we put it on the thumbnail, I'll go ahead and give my Jimmy Stewart impression. You want the moon? I'll get you the moon. Just right there, I'll throw a lasso around it and bring it right down for you. For those of you like, who the hell is that and what is he doing?
Go watch It's a Wonderful Life if you haven't seen it.
It's a movie called It's a Wonderful Life.
And watch it in black and white.
And it's an accent called the Mid-Atlantic accent, which is actually completely created.
Oh, I love this
for the purpose
history.
of movies. And it's like, hey, we want an accent that is accessible to everyone. Everyone can understand, but yet is not tied to anywhere.
Well, I just love that it was like the absurdity of it.
And it defined a whole era.
Yeah. Like we need a unifying way for all these people to act together. So we're just going to make them all learn the same fancy fake accent.
Yeah. And we'll post a video in the chat. This one's only 3 minutes long. It's called Why Do People in Old Movies Talk Weird? It's by a channel called Brain Stuff, which is by the company How Stuff Works.
And go watch Hollywood on Netflix.
Oh, yeah. They have that accent there, too.
Mm-hmm. And they talk about it.
So Moonshot. So I got distracted by, the spot on Jimmy Stewart impression.
Spot on.
What's in that tea over there?
Well, that's what I was about to say whenever you spilled it was this is a Monday morning for some Courvoisier cream.
What does that mean? That sounds fancy.
Well, I took the Irish cream, the Kentucky cream that we made with Libby when she was on the show, and I made it with Courvoisier instead, which I didn't even know how to say that until my Millhouse workshop on cognac and 2 craft cocktails that have names. I think it's the French 75 and the Sidecar. Those were the 2.
I'm glad you got it because I was not going to be any help for that.
Yeah.
So Moonshot. So we're defining what a moonshot is until Danielle hits the mic with her cup. So cheers. A moonshot is when you do something that is so far-fetched that it's like, oh, there's a very long shot of chance of that happening. And as Danielle brought up another related quote, which is, hey, if you aim for the moon, if you shoot for the moon, even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. And that is one of the reasons or justifications used as to why moonshots are worth it. And a company that is very well known for doing moonshots is now called Alphabet. They used to be called Google. And to be frank, I'm not sure exactly where within the structure their moonshots go, but for the purposes of simplifying this discussion, we'll just call them Google. Because Alphabet's their holding company, a move they made years ago, yada, yada, yada. So Google, they have this thing where they had a program where it's like, hey, we're going to do these moonshots. We're going to try these things. We're going to do this thing. We're not going to be afraid of failing. We're just going to see, hey, what would happen if we did this? One example of that is something called Google Loon, Loon. Not like a crazy person, but like the last part of the word balloon. And what this was they said, hey, we figured out this internet thing in the first world, right? We've got these towers everywhere. We've got these cables we've run everywhere to provide people access to whatever they want, whenever they want, even if they're flying through a tube. going 500 miles per hour and pulling out a device out of their phone and thinking of read every time they do it now, even if that's the case. But in a lot of these areas where that infrastructure doesn't exist, infrastructure is expensive, which, again, some more little knowledge nuggets for you guys. In case you weren't aware, a lot of the communications infrastructure here in the U.S. was subsidized by the government, which gets into this interesting discussion of, hey, companies like AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, things like that, they are built on the backbone of government tax-paying dollars. But yet, because of the way the contracts were written, they were able to get control over these things after a certain amount of time. I don't know, familiar with the exact terms, but now they have these pipes, quote unquote, they can use to pass data wherever they want. And so then comes to the question of, oh, well, we recognize it as important as a government, as people, that we need this communication infrastructure. We want to do some kind of partnership with companies, with private-public partnership. But then you start to get into some issues about, I'm getting.
And then you have recruiters recruit on bad contracts for your telecommunications companies,
right?
And then the moonshot.
Yeah, and then you get into you get into problems with monopolies and things like that as well. But a big digression. Moonshot, long shot, decided to do it. Project Loon was going to use basically weather balloons to float electronics around these areas of need to provide them internet. So it was a cool way of like, hey, kind of like we were working on satellites which orbit the Earth. It's like, okay, it's not quite a satellite, but it's still some electronics that are high up in the air so they can see a really far away and they can talk to things very far away. So that's an example of a moonshot. So they funded that, they did the testing, they say, okay, here's the things that would need to happen to move forward, right? But as it goes with moonshots, a lot of times you say, that moonshot's not worth it, or the steps required aren't worth it for us as an entity, but we learned some stuff and we're going to take that, put it in our belt, and move on to the next thing. But the thing is who should fund these moonshots, which coincidentally I started to get in a little tangent about who should fund these moonshots. And there's a question of, okay, should it be private or should it be public? And with moonshots, especially for things like space, since we're talking about it, you look at things like the moon landing in 1969. Well, guess what? There was a lot of public money going into funding this race towards space because everyone was into it. The Cold War was going on at the time. And it's like, hey, we recognize that this technology is important and it's going to change the world and it's going to progress everything going forward. That's how some people were thinking about it. Other people were thinking about it like, ooh, Russia bad, U.S. good. We do things before Russia. Yay. And that was enough for people to put money towards the space race, basically. And now we've been getting the benefits of that for decades after the fact because, one, not only did it create a whole bunch of new technologies, things that we use every day. I could be wrong on this, but for example, Teflon, the nonstick coating that we use for cooking, kickstarterkitchen.com, you should go check it out. Or helpfulforlife.com/KYK-cohorts. We'll put that link in the chat for you. So Teflon, the coating that comes on your nonstick pan, I believe it came from that. And there's a lot of other things that came from that as well, but it also created a structure and incentives and things like that to create more scientists, more people dealing in the STEM field, more people who wanted to do that. It inspired a generation of people who wanted to get into space, who wanted to do more, who wanted to do cutting edge things. And it's part of the reason why I, who didn't really have a certain affinity to space at all, I was drawn into satellite engineering because it was the cutting edge, because we were designing things that were the cutting edge themselves, but they also had to deal with this extremely harsh environment, super cold, lots of radiation, super hot. And for those who are curious about what all of that is and what all of that means, you could check out some stuff on the James Webb Space Telescope, which just launched, just to get an idea of how crazy this environment is and all the engineering that goes into it. So, moonshot.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say this tea is about to run through me.
Oh, the tea is about to run through you. Nice, I like it.
So yes.
So the people do the moonshots and say, okay, well, who should fund these moonshots? Well, in the case of the internet and communications, it started out as a public-private partnership. In the case of space, it started out as a public-private partnership, and now they've moved a little bit more towards the private side. And so that's why you see some changes in the space industry. And that's why, for example, a few months ago, Captain Kirk from Star Trek, who as an actor was what's his name? He looks kind of like Regis Philbin. He's 90 years old, but he looks like he's 60. and you're probably not going to know who it is. William Shatner. William Shatner is his name, ladies and gentlemen. 10 points to Gryffindor. So he went to space and a few months ago. It's like, okay, now if you're rich enough, or if a company thinks it's worth the publicity, you can now go up to space as an average person, which is a little bit of progress from 50 years ago when we were just like, oh, hey, we're going to go to the moon. And now launching rockets and sending things to space is literally like a weekly occurrence. A human space flight, not quite as much. But so moonshots are worth it, but who should fund them? And so how does that tie to us, Danielle? What are the moonshots that we're trying to do, right? Maybe they're not quite as lofty as trying to, get a man on the moon, but we are trying to do some things that are trying to improve people, make them better, things like that. And we're trying to figure out this whole mix of, hey, we know we can help you. We know we've got the skills, the knowledge, the connections, the people to make you successful as a person. But what are the nuts and bolts? What are how that happens? And one of the things that you're working on as a first step.
Well, I was just going to say, I saw a quote this morning as I was walking Lincoln, and it was like, don't tell people what you're going to do. Just do it and show them. And I've done a lot of saying I'm going to do something and then not following through on it for one reason or another. So I think for my personal moonshots, I'm just going to write those in my journal and then just, trickle things out as they're actually happening and as I'm doing them on my blog and social media, but not announce anything for myself ahead of the game.
I like that.
But yes, is there something you want to announce for Helpful for Life?
Well, yes, there is. But before we get to that, do you want to talk about the thing that you were working on that you would like to launch here shortly, or you don't want to talk about that?
Yeah.
Okay, staying tight-lipped about that one. I like it. Okay, so for Helpful for Life, one of the things that we're working on right now is a way to teach you guys how to cook that you can engage with and start to learn without there being some big hubbub around the whole thing. And so what we're doing is we're flying by the seat of our pants with the exact timing of it all, but we're trying to teach people how to cook, how to impress a date. Let me try that again. We're trying to teach people how to cook so they can impress a date before Valentine's Day. And we're trying to decide on the best way to do that. And we're figuring out the best mix of, how much do we charge people? How much do we leave free? Because we're trying to grow our audience. We're trying to help people, but also make some money to make this thing a sustainable thing. So that's a little bit behind the scenes of what we're doing with that. And we also have some other big stories, some big launches that are in the works as well. And so you guys will hear more about those in a little bit. But the main thing I wanted to say around these moonshots for today as it pertains to our companies is that some of it is we're going to make these announcements. We're going to try and do these things. And some of them you may be like, good luck with that. Like, why are you even trying to do that? You really think you can do that from where you're starting right now? Like, what are you doing? But that's part of the point is to, when you aim really big, instead of aiming for 1 times, if you aim for 10 times or 100 times or 1,000 times, if you aim so big, it actually causes you to think differently. And if you're trying to say, hey, I just need to sell like 5 of these things, like you're going to think a certain way, like, okay, how could I sell 5 of these things? But if instead you said, I'm going to sell 500 of these things or 5,000 of these things or 50,000 of these things, then inherently you have to think differently and you have to look at the problem differently. And then you start to come up with different answers and different solutions. And maybe it turns out that, hey, that certain thing you were trying to do, it really doesn't make sense for you to do 5,000. And now that you've kind of gone down that path, like, okay, that's probably not the best thing. But the thing is we oftentimes so constrain ourselves in the way we're thinking that we don't even allow ourselves to think in that quote unquote unrealistic way. And that's kind of the benefit of trying to do a moonshot and aiming for a moonshot is you make that outrageous claim and then you start, hey, can we actually do that? And that's the beauty of what I've been able to learn from my engineering and all the experience of this point is we can take this massive giant problem, but then we can, we could take a satellite with thousands, if not millions of parts and a bunch of different complex unique systems. And then we can break it down into the subsections, into the subsystems, to where you can understand, oh, this part needs these things to happen and needs some person making sure they're paying attention to that. This part needs this part needs that. Oh, and that part over there needs that. And that's tied to this with all of that. Being able to analyze and connect all those things and break it down into realistic, actionable steps that can actually happen, that's within my wheelhouse. And that's what I'm good at. And so that's why having these big announcements and these big moonshots that we'll be talking about here shortly, that's why there is a little bit of realism to them, because one, we're going to figure out what steps would need to happen, and we have the connections and the knowledge to make them happen. But also, so what? Even if we do fail, say we're aiming for here, but we end up down here. We only make it halfway. Well, guess what? We started on the ground, so we'll take that, and that's the beauty of starting from nothing, is that anywhere is up. And we'll learn from that, and we'll iterate into our next rocket launch, and we'll see where that takes us from there. So there's a little bit of a weird episode for everyone at home. Started out with a bunch of weird tech issues, plenty of tangents. That part's normal. And then just a little bit of insights into space and some of the different angles in it. And one we didn't talk about too much was astrology. So just real quickly on that, one of the things you were talking about with the moon and things like that was a lot of symbolism. And I really like the idea of, hey, there is this symbol of time passing that goes through the sky, right? Moon. And it goes through these various phases over 29 days, and roughly. And you can decide, am I going to ascribe some meaning to that or not? And much like when Danielle has come on and she's done tarot, a lot of people have maybe written off tarot as like, oh, that's something that those crazy witchy gypsies do. They write things off without fully understanding it first. And instead, what Danielle decided to do was be a little curious, find out a little bit more about it. And then she's like, hey, this is actually a really cool thing. And she said, hey, if I look at these and I decide, what do these cards mean to me? What do these symbols make me think of? And how can I use these to be better for me and the people that are around me? Instead of like writing it off and saying, oh, that's stupid, I'm not going to get any value out of that, even though they've been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years by now. She instead chose to, hey, a lot of people value this thing and think it's important. Maybe I can learn a little bit about what's important and what they get out of it. And Danielle's meaning is a little different than the next person, and I'm sure there are plenty of people within that community who will disagree with her about her thoughts on the moon cycle, on tarot, and all that type of stuff. But at the end of the day, they are all symbols which you get to interpret.
Yeah. Well, and as we decide meaning for what we want to do for today, do we have a challenge? You start doing all the things?
A challenge to start doing all the things. Yeah. I think the challenge has got to be moon related. So if you want a really easy challenge that you don't have to work hard on, it's to make something with cheese. Because often the times the joke was that moon was made out of cheese because it kind of looks like Swiss cheese up there in the sky. And if you're looking for something to make with cheese, then there's no better place to look than DanielleMGarcia.com, because there's Danielle.
But my Instagram might be better now.
Your Instagram?
Yeah.
Okay. So
I've been sharing recipes and just putting the recipe in the Instagram caption.
Okay.
So you don't have to go through a whole nother blog post.
So your
for it.
Instagram is?
So it's Danielle with the IE as a 1-3. So it's 13. So Danielle M. Garcia, DAN13LLE M. Garcia.
And they search that on Instagram, they'll find you. And we'll put a link in the chat as well for those of you at home. So check out her Instagram, because cheese is her number one food group, whether it be mac and cheese, whether it be queso, whether it be quesadilla, whether it be...
Followed closely by bread and butter.
Yeah, exactly. She's got plenty of things to make with cheese. So that's an easy, low-hanging fruit for you guys. But the challenge I really want to encourage you guys to make instead is a moonshot. And what is your moonshot? If there's one thing you could do in your life, if there's one thing you could be, if there's something like that, like, what is it? And this could be something for you that's, a decades-long quest. This could be something for this month. This could be something for this year. It's up to you to decide what exactly that is. But if there was something where you could stake your flag in the ground and say, hey, this is the thing I'm going to strive for, what would it be? And of course, like we talk a lot on the show about the downsides of only having the singular goal in the future, and instead of doing just that, shifting towards focusing on what little steps you can do every day. What's the 1% you can get better every day? So that's the thing. We're here to help you guys succeed, and you need both. You need to have that moonshot to help drive you, help inspire you, help give you a place to know where you're going. And then you need to have the realistic and the actionable things that you can be doing on a daily and a weekly basis. And so that's my challenge to you guys. What is your moonshot? And let us know. You can put it in the comments on whatever platform you're on. Right now we're on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. Or you can go to our website, helpfulforlife.com, and hit the contact us button in the top right to let us know what your moonshot is. Because we'd love to hear what you guys are trying to do. We'd love to help you along the way. And, you know, maybe we can even do a little bit of pushing things in your direction as well. So don't hesitate to reach out at all. Well, with that, Danielle, any other moon-related thoughts?
Mm-mm.
All right. It popped in my head, so I might as well mention it. There's a period tracker that you use that's related to moon. What's that called for people who are interested? Tell people the 2 cents on that one.
It's basically, it gives you every morning a like hormones reading. So like where you are in your menstrual cycle, and then also a moon horoscope reading for the day. So it's my hormones and horoscope.
Get those H's in there. I like it. Well, with that, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for tolerating our technical issues. We're hoping there will be many less going into the future, especially now that we have a lovely extra member on our team who will be joining us in 13 days or something like that. Not that I'm counting 2 weeks minus on Friday. So with that, everyone have a wonderful week. Let us know what your moonshots are going to be. And if you need a little bit of time to think about it, we've got some music for you right now.
you.